Bikers were humiliating and harassing a young girl at a gas station. But when Keanu Reeves showed up, they were shocked. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching this video from. The highway stretched out endlessly before him, a dark ribbon cutting through the desolate expanse of the desert. The rhythmic hum of the motorcycle beneath him was soothing, a steady companion against the otherwise silent night. Above, the stars scattered like glitter spilled across a vast black canvas, their light faint but persistent. The cool wind whipped at his face, tugging at the ends of his dark hair that peeked from beneath his helmet. Keen eyes scanned the horizon as Keanu Reeves rode on, his mind as tranquil as the night around him. The isolation of the open road was something he cherished. It gave him time to think, to be present in a world that often demanded more of him than he wished to give. Tonight, the world felt distant, as if it were asleep, leaving only him and the infinite stretch of highway to keep each other company. In the distance, a faint glow appeared, growing larger with every passing second. A roadside gas station materialized, its neon sign flickering intermittently. The light fought valiantly against the surrounding darkness, casting a weak halo over the modest establishment. The sight of it broke the monotony of the ride, drawing Keanu toward it with the promise of fuel and a brief respite. As he approached, the outlines of the station became clearer. It was small, with only 2 pumps standing under a rusty metal awning. Beside them was a compact convenience store, its glass doors reflecting the blinking neon of the sign above. A single car idled by the pumps, its driver leaning casually against the hood. The faint beat of music drifted from within. Further off, a cluster of motorcycles stood in a loose semicircle, their riders nowhere in sight. Keanu pulled up to one of the pumps, the sound of his engine breaking the stillness. He cut the ignition, and silence fell once more, save for the occasional chirping of crickets. Removing his helmet, he ran a hand through his hair, taking a moment to observe his surroundings. The place seemed ordinary enough, but something about the scene put him on edge. The man by the car glanced at him briefly before returning his attention to his phone. The gas station clerk, visible through the glass doors, seemed fidgety, glancing nervously toward the back of the store. It was subtle, but Keanu's keen instincts picked up on the unease. Years of observing people had honed his ability to read situations, and this one didn't feel right. He stepped off his motorcycle and began filling the tank, his movements unhurried but deliberate. His eyes flicked to the cluster of motorcycles again. Their presence, combined with the clerk's nervous behavior, hinted at trouble. Keanu wasn't one to assume the worst without cause, but he remained vigilant. As he replaced the nozzle, the faint sound of raised voices reached his ears. It was coming from behind the gas station. Keanu paused, his gaze narrowing as he focused on the noise. The voices grew louder, punctuated by harsh laughter and mocking tones. Something about the sound tightened his chest, setting off an alarm in the back of his mind. He glanced towards the convenience store where the clerk now stood frozen, staring in the direction of the commotion. Their eyes met briefly, and the clerk quickly looked away, retreating behind the counter. Placing his helmet on the seat of his motorcycle, Keanu straightened and adjusted the collar of his leather jacket. He moved toward the source of the noise with the same calm deliberation that had defined his actions all evening. Around the corner of the building, the voices became clearer, tinged with cruelty and derision. As Keanu stepped into the shadows behind the gas station, the scene unfolded before him. 4 men, clad in leather jackets adorned with aggressive insignias, stood in a loose semicircle around a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 20, her slender frame pressed against the wall as if she wished she could melt into it. Her hands clutched a worn backpack tightly to her chest, her wide eyes darting between her tormentors as though searching for an escape. The men were laughing, their voices loud and brash in the otherwise quiet night. They took turns taunting her, their words dripping with malice. One of them, a burly figure with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, reached out and tugged at the strap of her backpack. The girl jerked back instinctively, her grip tightening as she tried to keep hold of it. "Come on, sweetheart," he sneered, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. "What have you got in there? Something worth sharing with your new friends?" The others laughed, egging him on as he yanked harder, causing her to stumble. She tried to pull away, but another man stepped forward, blocking her path. He leaned in close, his grin revealing a row of crooked teeth. "Don't be shy," he said, his tone sickly sweet. "We're just trying to get to know you." Keanu's jaw tightened as he took in the scene. The girl's terror was palpable, and it was clear that the situation was escalating. One of the men reached out and touched her arm, a possessive gesture that made her flinch. She shook her head, her voice trembling as she protested, but her words were lost beneath their jeers. The moment stretched, heavy with tension. Keanu's hands clenched at his sides, his calm exterior masking the anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't something he could walk away from. He stepped forward, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. The sound was faint but deliberate, cutting through the laughter like a knife. 4 pairs of eyes snapped toward him, their amusement faltering as they registered his presence. Keanu stood still, his posture relaxed but commanding. The faint glow of the gas station lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the steely determination in his gaze. The men exchanged glances, their bravado flickering as they sized him up. The girl, still clutching her backpack, looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. The tension in the air thickened as the confrontation began to take shape. Keanu didn't say a word, but his mere presence was enough to shift the balance of power. The men hesitated, their confidence wavering as they realized they were no longer in control. The night that had begun with quiet solitude was about to erupt into chaos. The tension hung heavy in the air as though the world itself was holding its breath. The 4 men turned fully to face Keanu, their mocking grins fading as they sized him up. His posture was relaxed, but his piercing gaze and measured steps towards them carried a silent warning. The young girl, still pressed against the wall, seemed frozen between hope and fear, her wide eyes locked on him. "Who the hell are you?" the largest of the men growled, his voice rough and brimming with annoyance. He was the leader, the one with the scar running down his cheek. His arms were crossed over his broad chest, tattoos snaking up both forearms. The others flanked him, each exuding the same aura of arrogant menace. Keanu didn't answer. He stopped a few paces away, his calm demeanor unshaken. He looked at the girl, her trembling form barely holding up under the weight of the situation. She clutched her backpack like a lifeline, her knuckles white against the worn fabric. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and he gave her the faintest nod, an unspoken promise that she wasn't alone anymore. The leader didn't like being ignored. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he barked, stepping forward. The other men followed his lead, forming a loose semicircle to block Keanu's path. Keanu shifted his gaze back to them, his expression calm but unreadable. His silence only fueled their irritation. One of the men, shorter but wiry, smirked and leaned closer. "You lost or something, buddy? This ain't your business." Still, Keanu said nothing. Instead, he took another step forward, positioning himself slightly between the girl and the men. It was a subtle but deliberate move that didn't go unnoticed. The leader laughed, a low, grating sound. "Oh, I see what this is. You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Gonna save the damsel in distress?" He gestured toward the girl without looking at her. "She's fine, we're just having a little fun. Ain't that right, sweetheart?" The girl didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a tight line and her shoulders trembled with barely restrained fear. The leader's grin widened, mistaking her silence for submission. Keanu's voice finally broke the tense quiet. It was low, steady, and carried an authority that made the men pause. "Walk away." The two simple words hung in the air like a challenge. The leader's grin faltered, his brow furrowing as he realized this wasn't going to go the way he'd expected. "Excuse me?" he said, his tone dripping with mock disbelief. "Walk away? Who do you think you're talking to?" Keanu didn't repeat himself. He simply stood there, his presence alone enough to unsettle them. The leader's bravado flared in response, and he took another step forward, now standing mere feet from Keanu. "Listen, pal, you don't want to mess with us. We're not some punks you can scare off. So why don't you mind your own damn—" He didn't get to finish. The girl let out a small gasp as Keanu moved, faster than any of them could react. His arm shot out, catching the leader by the wrist as he reached for him. With a swift motion, Keanu twisted, forcing the man to his knees. The leader let out a strangled yelp, his free hand clawing at Keanu's iron grip. The other men reacted immediately, their shock turning to anger. "Get him!" one of them shouted, lunging toward Keanu. The wiry man swung a fist, aiming for Keanu's head, but Keanu ducked effortlessly, stepping into the man's momentum and delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs. The man staggered back, gasping for air. The girl's eyes widened as the scene unfolded in front of her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. One man standing against four, moving with a precision and confidence that bordered on superhuman. It wasn't a fight, it was a dismantling. The third man, stockier and slower than the others, grabbed a metal rod that had been leaning against the wall. He swung it wildly, but Keanu sidestepped with ease, catching the rod mid-swing and yanking it from his hands. With a quick motion, he used it to sweep the man's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The fourth man hesitated, clearly reevaluating his chances. "Screw this," he muttered, turning to run. But Keanu was faster. He grabbed the man by the collar and spun him around, his eyes boring into him with quiet intensity. "Stay," Keanu said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. The leader, still on his knees, tried to pull free, but Keanu tightened his grip, forcing him to stay put. "What the hell, man?" the leader snarled, his earlier confidence now replaced with anger and fear. "You're crazy." Keanu leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Leave her alone. Now." The leader glanced at his companions, now groaning on the ground, and seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he nodded, his bravado crumbling. Fine, we're done, okay? Just let me go." Keanu released him and the man stumbled back, clutching his wrist. He gestured for the others to follow, barking at them to get up. One by one, they retreated, casting wary glances at Keanu as they went. Within moments, the night was quiet again, the sound of their motorcycles fading into the distance. Keanu turned to the girl, who was still pressed against the wall. She looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, She stepped away from the wall, clutching her backpack to her chest. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked gently, his voice losing its earlier edge. She nodded, though her voice was shaky. I think so. Thank you." Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe now." But as he looked into her frightened eyes, he knew the night was far from over. The world seemed to hold its breath as Keanu stood amidst the aftermath of the confrontation. The once loud jeers of the bikers had been silenced, replaced by the faint hum of distant crickets and the occasional rustle of a breeze. The young girl, still clutching her backpack, looked at him with wide, tear-streaked eyes. For a moment, everything seemed still, but Keanu knew the tension hadn't fully dissipated. The leader of the group, a man whose bravado had been stripped away, glared at Keanu from where he crouched on the ground, cradling his bruised wrist. He muttered curses under his breath, his pride clearly more injured than his body. The other bikers were in various states of retreat, some limping toward their motorcycles, others leaning against walls to catch their breath. Their earlier aggression had dissolved into subdued resentment, but Keanu didn't relax. He had learned long ago that desperation could make even the defeated unpredictable. The girl moved slightly, her trembling form stepping out of the shadow of the building. Her voice was barely audible. Are they gone?" Keanu glanced at her, his expression softening. "For now," he replied, his voice calm but firm, "but they'll be back if they think they can get away with it." She nodded, though her eyes darted nervously toward the men. One of the bikers, a wiry man with a cut on his cheek, seemed to take offense at Keanu's words. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh?" He spat, his voice thick with venom. "You've got no idea who you're messing with." Keanu turned his gaze to the man, his calm demeanor unshaken. "I don't need to," he said evenly, "but I know enough." The leader, emboldened by his companion's outburst, pushed himself to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate. "You think this is over?" he sneered. "You think you can just walk in here, play the knight in shining armor, and walk away?" Keanu didn't flinch. His eyes, cold and piercing, met the leader's, and for a moment the man faltered. Keanu took a step closer, his presence radiating quiet authority. "It's over," he said, his voice low and steady, "unless you want it to get worse." The leader's mouth opened as if to retort, but something in Keanu's tone stopped him. Instead, he muttered something incoherent under his breath and motioned to his men. "Let's get out of here." Reluctantly, the bikers began to shuffle toward their motorcycles, their movements slow and deliberate as if hoping to regain some semblance of dignity. The girl watched them go, her body still tense, as though she expected them to turn back at any moment. Keanu stood between her and the men, his stance protective, until the roar of their engines faded into the distance. Only then did he relax slightly, turning his attention back to the girl. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now. She shook her head, though her hands still trembled as they clutched her backpack. "No, I'm okay, thanks to you." He nodded, his gaze assessing her for any signs of injury she might not have noticed. She seemed unharmed physically, but the fear in her eyes told him she wasn't okay, not really. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone softening further. "Layla," she said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Layla," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You're safe now, Layla, but we need to make sure it stays that way." Her brows furrowed slightly, and she looked at him with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "What do you mean?" Keanu gestured toward the gas station. "We should call the police," he said. "Let them know what happened. Those guys won't stop unless someone makes them." Her eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. "No, I can't. I don't want any trouble. I just want to go home." He understood her hesitation, the fear of retaliation, the desire to avoid drawing attention to herself. It was all written plainly across her face. But Keanu also knew that letting those men get away with what they had done, or what they had almost done, wasn't an option. He crouched slightly, meeting her gaze on her level. "Layla, I get it," he said, his voice quiet but insistent. "But if they think they can get away with this, they'll do it again. Maybe to someone else. Maybe to you." She looked down, her grip on her backpack tightening. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, finally, she nodded, her voice trembling as she said, "Okay, you're right." Keanu straightened and led her back toward the front of the gas station. The clerk, who had been watching nervously from behind the counter, jumped slightly as they entered. His eyes darted from Keanu to Layla, then to the empty parking lot outside. "Are they gone?" he asked, his voice shaky. "For now," Keanu replied, "but I need to use your phone." The clerk nodded quickly, pushing the receiver toward him. Keanu dialed the local police, giving them a succinct but detailed account of what had happened. He kept his voice calm and steady, his words precise. When he hung up, he turned back to Layla. "They're on their way," he said. "It shouldn't take long." Layla nodded, though her nervous fidgeting hadn't ceased. Keanu could see the weight of the night bearing down on her. She was young, vulnerable, and clearly unprepared for the kind of cruelty she had just faced. But there was a strength in her, too, a resilience that had kept her standing even in the face of overwhelming fear. He didn't say it, but he admired that. As they waited, Keanu kept a watchful eye on the horizon, his instincts on high alert. He knew men like those bikers didn't always let things go easily, and he wouldn't take any chances. Layla, meanwhile, sat in one of the plastic chairs near the entrance, her head bowed as she hugged her backpack tightly. When the flashing lights of a police car appeared in the distance, Keanu felt a small measure of relief, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. Layla would need more than just a police report to feel safe again, and as he glanced at her sitting small and shaken under the harsh glow of the gas station lights, he made a silent decision. He wasn't going to leave her until he was sure she was truly safe. The flashing blue and red lights of the approaching police car painted the dark surroundings in bursts of color. Layla sat stiffly in the plastic chair near the gas station's entrance, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack like a lifeline. Her wide, tear-streaked eyes flicked nervously to the horizon where the bikers had disappeared minutes earlier. She flinched slightly as the patrol car pulled into the lot, its tires crunching over gravel. Keanu stood beside her, calm but vigilant. His presence was steady, an unspoken promise that no further harm would come to her. The officer who stepped out of the vehicle was middle-aged, with a weathered face that spoke of years on the job. He adjusted his belt and approached them cautiously, his eyes sweeping over the scene. "Evening," the officer greeted, his tone cautious but professional. "Got a call about an incident involving some bikers?" "That's right," Keanu replied. His voice was steady and clear, cutting through the tense atmosphere. He quickly summarized the events, how he had come upon the bikers harassing Layla, their escalating aggression, and his intervention. He spoke without embellishment, giving just the facts. The officer nodded as he took notes, glancing occasionally at Layla, who remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. "You did the right thing calling this in," the officer said, addressing both of them. He turned to Layla, his voice softening. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Layla shook her head quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fine." The officer's brow furrowed, concern flickering across his face, but he didn't press her. Instead, he turned his attention back to Keanu. "Did they say anything specific? Threats, names, anything that could help us identify them?" Keanu described the leader, the scar on his face, the tattoos on his arms, and the group's overall demeanor. The officer scribbled it all down, his expression growing graver with each detail. "Sounds like a group we've had trouble with before," he muttered. "Small-time gang, but they've been getting bolder lately. I'll put out an alert." As the officer spoke, another sound reached Keanu's ears, the distant, unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines. He stiffened, his sharp eyes snapping toward the dark road where the bikers had disappeared. The sound grew louder, closer, a low growl that sent a chill through the air. The officer heard it too. His hand instinctively moved to his holster as he turned toward the sound. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. The rumble grew into a roar as the bikers returned, their headlights piercing the darkness like predatory eyes. This time, there were more of them. At least a dozen motorcycles thundered into the lot, their riders forming a loose semicircle around the gas station. The leader was at the front, his scarred face twisted into a sneer. Beside him, new members of the group sat astride their bikes, their faces obscured by helmets and bandanas. "Well, well," the leader called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look who's still here. Thought you could just walk away, huh?" The officer stepped forward, his voice firm. "That's enough. Break it up and leave, or you're all getting arrested." The leader laughed, the sound cold and grating. "Arrest us? For what? Hanging out at a gas station? Don't think you've got anything on us, officer." He spat the word like a challenge, his eyes gleaming with malice. Keanu's jaw tightened, his gaze locked on the leader. He could feel the tension thickening around them, the situation teetering on the edge of chaos. He glanced at Layla, who had shrunk further into her chair, her fear palpable. The leader's attention shifted to her, and his grin widened. "There's our little friend," he drawled. "We were just getting to know her when your buddy here decided to play hero." Keanu stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the bikers and Layla. "She's not your concern anymore," he said, his voice low and steady. "Oh, but she is," the leader replied, leaning forward on his handlebars. "You see, nobody messes with us and gets away with it. Not her, not you." The officer raised his voice, his hand on his weapon. "This is your last warning. Leave now, or I'll have every one of you hauled in." The leader tilted his head, as if considering the threat. Then he smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "I think we'll take our chances." With a barked command, the bikers dismounted their motorcycles, their movements quick and coordinated. Chains, pipes, and bats appeared in their hands, gleaming under the gas station's flickering lights. The officer drew his weapon, shouting for them to stand down, but the bikers didn't stop. They spread out, encircling Keanu, the officer, and Layla. Keanu's posture shifted subtly, his muscles tensing as he prepared for the inevitable. He glanced at the officer. "Get her out of here," he said quietly. The officer hesitated, his grip tightening on his gun. "I can't just leave you." "Now," Keanu interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. He turned his attention back to the bikers, his expression calm but deadly serious. The officer hesitated a moment longer before grabbing Layla's arm gently. "Come on," he said, guiding her toward the patrol car. She resisted, her eyes darting to Keanu. "What about him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "He'll be fine," the officer assured her, though his tone was less certain than he would have liked. As the car pulled away, Keanu faced the bikers alone. The leader stepped forward, his scarred face illuminated by the dim light. "Brave move, sending your backup away," he said with a smirk, "but it won't save you." Keanu didn't respond. He stood still, his eyes locked on the leader, waiting. The tension broke like a thunderclap as the first biker lunged at him, swinging a chain. Keanu moved like lightning, catching the chain mid-swing and yanking it free. With a swift motion, he used it to disarm the next attacker, the chain snapping against the man's wrist with a sharp crack. The fight erupted into chaos. Bikers came at Keanu from all sides, their weapons gleaming and their shouts echoing into the night. But Keanu was relentless, a whirlwind of precision and power. He ducked and weaved, every movement calculated, every strike decisive. A man swung a bat at his head, but Keanu sidestepped and delivered a sharp elbow to his ribs, sending him sprawling. The leader hung back, watching as his men were systematically taken down. His smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Keanu, undeterred, continued to fight, his focus unwavering. One by one, the bikers fell, their confidence crumbling under the weight of his skill. Finally, only the leader remained. He stepped forward, his sneer returning as he raised a steel pipe. "You're good," he admitted, "but not good enough." Keanu didn't reply. He moved first, closing the distance between them in a blur of motion. The leader swung the pipe, but Keanu caught it, twisting it free with a flick of his wrist. He delivered a swift, controlled strike to the man's stomach, doubling him over, before lifting him effortlessly and slamming him to the ground. The leader groaned, his bravado shattered. Keanu straightened, his breathing steady as he looked down at the man. "Stay down," he said simply. The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of backup, the wail growing louder with each passing second. Keanu didn't wait for the authorities to arrive. He turned, walking calmly toward his motorcycle. The fight was over, but the night had left its mark. He knew the bikers wouldn't forget him, but he also knew they wouldn't forget the lesson he'd taught them tonight. The gas station was a war zone in the aftermath of the fight. The flickering lights above cast uneven shadows over the lot where battered bikers groaned and clutched their injuries. The wail of approaching sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Keanu stood by his motorcycle, adjusting his jacket and ensuring his helmet was secured on the seat. His calm, deliberate movements belied the intensity of what had just transpired. The patrol car that had taken Layla and the officer away moments earlier returned, followed by 2 additional police vehicles. Their flashing lights painted the scene in vivid reds and blues. Uniformed officers stepped out, their eyes widening as they took in the fallen bikers and the disarray surrounding the gas station. One officer, a stocky man with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached Keanu cautiously. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, his hand hovering near his holster. Keanu looked at him steadily. "They came back," he said simply. "They wanted revenge." The officer glanced at the groaning bikers, some of whom were now attempting to crawl away. He signaled for his colleagues to detain them, then turned back to Keanu. "You took all of them down by yourself?" Keanu gave a faint shrug, his expression unreadable. "They didn't give me much of a choice." Before the officer could press further, another car pulled into the lot. Layla stepped out cautiously, her small frame silhouetted against the flashing lights. The officer who had driven her earlier followed closely, his hand on her shoulder in a protective gesture. Her eyes darted around, taken in the scene with a mix of disbelief and relief. "Keanu?" she called out, her voice breaking slightly. She broke away from the officer and ran toward him, her backpack swinging wildly at her side. She stopped just short of him, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Keanu's expression softened as he looked at her. "I'm fine," he said gently. "It's over." Tears welled in her eyes and she let out a shaky laugh, the tension of the night finally catching up to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." Before Keanu could respond, the stocky officer stepped forward. "We're going to need statements from both of you," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We'll take care of these guys, but we need to know exactly what happened." Keanu nodded, and the two of them were guided to the patrol car, where another officer took their statements. Layla spoke haltingly at first, her voice trembling as she recounted the biker's harassment and Keanu's intervention. But as she continued, her voice grew steadier, her words firmer. By the time she finished, there was a glimmer of strength in her eyes. Keanu's account was brief and precise. He described the events without embellishment, focusing on the facts and omitting unnecessary details. The officer taking notes gave him a long, appraising look when he finished, but didn't ask further questions. When the statements were done, Keanu and Layla were left standing by the patrol car as the officers worked to secure the scene. Layla hugged her backpack tightly, her earlier calm starting to crack as the adrenaline wore off. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Keanu asked, his voice cutting gently through the quiet. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. I was heading home, but my bus broke down and I don't know if I want to take another one tonight. What if they—" She broke off, shaking her head. Keanu thought for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "Let's figure something out," he said. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in years. It was someone from his charity work, a social worker who specialized in helping young people in crisis. He tapped the number and held the phone to his ear. The conversation was brief. Keanu explained the situation, describing Layla and what had happened that night. The person on the other end listened intently, then assured him they could help. They gave him an address for a nearby safe house where Layla could stay temporarily, with counselors on hand to assist her. He ended the call and turned to Layla. "There's a place you can go," he said. "It's safe, and they'll help you get back on your feet." She looked at him with wide eyes, a flicker of hope breaking through her exhaustion. "Really? They'll help me?" Keanu nodded. "They will. And if you ever need anything, you can call me." He handed her a piece of paper with his number on it, written in neat, blocky letters. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "Thank you," she said again, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't even know how to thank you for everything you've done." "You don't have to," Keanu replied. "Just focus on getting where you need to be." A short time later, another car arrived to take Layla to the safe house. She looked back at Keanu as she climbed into the vehicle, her expression a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. He gave her a small nod, a silent assurance that she was going to be okay. As the car disappeared into the night, Keanu stood alone in the lot, the chaos around him beginning to settle. The police were still processing the scene, and the bikers were being loaded into the back of patrol vehicles, their faces sullen and defeated. One of the officers approached him. "You're free to go," he said. "We've got everything we need. But if we have more questions, we'll be in touch." Keanu nodded. He retrieved his helmet from his motorcycle and mounted it, the weight of the night pressing against his shoulders. As he started the engine, the rumble echoed across the now quiet gas station. Without another word, he pulled out onto the dark highway, the red and blue lights fading into the distance behind him. The night was far from over, but for Layla, it was a new beginning. And as Keanu rode into the darkness, he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He hadn't set out to be a hero, but tonight he had made a difference, and that was enough. The highway stretched out before Keanu, a dark ribbon winding through the silent night. The roar of his motorcycle filled the void, its steady hum blending with the soft whisper of the wind. Though he had left the chaos of the gas station behind, the events of the evening lingered in his mind, playing out in vivid flashes. Layla's trembling form, the cruel jeers of the bikers, the tense confrontation that had pushed him to act. The road was empty now, its desolation a stark contrast to the violent intensity he had just experienced. The adrenaline that had coursed through his veins earlier had ebbed, leaving behind a quiet resolve. He hadn't just fought to protect Layla. He had fought to remind himself, and perhaps those bikers, that standing by in the face of cruelty was never an option. But he couldn't shake the image of Layla's face as she was driven away. Her wide eyes, filled with both gratitude and lingering fear, stayed with him. Keanu knew she was safe now, heading toward a place where she could begin to heal. Yet a part of him felt restless, as though his role in her story wasn't quite over. The faint glow of city lights appeared on the horizon, a beacon pulling him back toward civilization. He decided to stop for a moment, to gather his thoughts and shake off the weight of the night. Pulling into a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering faintly, Keanu parked his motorcycle and stepped inside. The diner was nearly empty, save for a couple seated in a corner booth and a lone waitress wiping down the counter. The warm, yellow light and soft hum of an old jukebox created a comforting contrast to the cold expanse of the highway. Keanu slid into a booth near the window, his reflection faintly visible in the glass as he stared out into the night. A steaming cup of black coffee was placed in front of him moments later. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gave him a small smile. "Long night?" she asked, her voice carrying the gentle rasp of someone who'd seen her share of late hours. "You could say that," Keanu replied, his tone calm but distant. She nodded, as though she understood more than he had said, and returned to the counter. Keanu sipped the coffee, the warmth spreading through him as he gazed out at the darkness. He thought of Layla, wondering how she was feeling now, if she was beginning to believe in her own safety again. His phone buzzed on the table, snapping him out of his thoughts. He picked it up, surprised to see a message from an unfamiliar number. Opening it, he found a short, heartfelt note. "Hi, it's Layla. I just wanted to say thank you again. I'm at the safe house now, and everyone here is so kind. They said they'll help me get home and figure out what's next. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there. You're a hero, even if you don't think you are. Thank you for everything." Keanu read the message twice, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He typed a quick reply, keeping it simple. "I'm glad you're safe. Take care of yourself, and remember, you're stronger than you think." He set the phone down, his mind easing with the knowledge that she was in good hands. The memory of her trembling voice, the way she clutched her backpack like it was the only thing anchoring her to safety. It was a reminder of how fragile life could feel in moments of fear. But Layla had stood strong, even in the face of cruelty, and that resilience was something no one could take from her. As he finished his coffee, the soft chime of the diner's bell signaled the arrival of another customer. Keanu glanced up briefly, his instincts still on high alert, but it was just a trucker, his heavy boots thudding against the tiled floor as he made his way to the counter. The normalcy of the moment grounded him, reminding him that the world kept moving, even after chaos. When he stepped back outside, the air was crisp and cool, the quiet hum of the diner fading as he approached his motorcycle. He paused for a moment, gazing up at the stars scattered across the black sky. The night felt lighter now, the weight of what had happened earlier no longer pressing as heavily on his shoulders. As he started his bike and pulled back onto the highway, Keanu allowed himself a moment of reflection. The fight at the gas station, the fear in Layla's eyes, and the resolve he had felt to protect her, all of it had reaffirmed something he already knew. That strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the odds. The road stretched out endlessly ahead of him, the city lights fading into the distance as he rode toward the unknown. Somewhere out there, Layla was beginning a new chapter of her life, one where she could rebuild and reclaim her sense of security. And Keanu, as he disappeared into the night, carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference. He hadn't set out to be a hero, but tonight, in the stillness of the open road, he realized that sometimes being in the right place at the right time was all it took to change someone's life. And that was enough. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Share this video with your friends and check out more incredible stories on our channel. See you in the next one.